Esther chapter 2. Achar hadvarim ha'ele. After these words, Kashok Hamata Hamelech Ahasuerosh, as the subsiding of the wrath of the king Ahasuerosh, Dhakar et Washti, he remembered Washti, with Atra Ashata, and what she had done. With Atra Nigazar Alaha, and what he decreed on account of her. Wayomeru Nagre Hamelek Masharataiw, Yevakashu Lamelek Nagarot Betulot Tovot Mara, and the lads of the king, his servants, said, Let them seek for the king young women, virgins, good ones of appearance. ويفقد حملك بقيديم بكل مدينة ملكوته, and let the king muster officers in all the provinces of his kingdom. ويقبضوا את כל נגרה בתולת בת מראה אל שושן הבירה אל בית הנתים אל יד הגה סריס המלך שומר הנתים ונתון תמרוקהן. And let them gather every virgin lass good of appearance to Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, to the hand of Heger, chamberlain of the king, keeper of the women, and their purifications to be given. وَحَنَّغَرَا أَطْرَتِي تَبْبَعِنِ حَمَّلَكَ تِمَلُكَ تَحَتَ وَشْتِي, and the lass which is good in the eyes of the king shall reign in place of Washti. وَيِتَبْ هَدَّبَرْ بَعِنِ حَمَّلَكَ وَيَعْشَكَنَ, and the word was good in the eyes of the king, and he effectuated thus. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habira, ushmo Mordecai ben Yahir ben Shimei ben Kish, Ish Yemini. A Yehudi man was in the palace Shushan, and his name Mordecai, the son of Yair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a man of Yemini. Atar Hogla Mirushalem, Im Hagola Atar Hoglata, Im Yekonaya, Melech Yehuda, which was carried away captive from Jerusalem with the captivity, which was carried away captive with Yekoniah, the king of Yehuda. Atar Hegela Nebuchadnezzar Melech Babel, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, carried away captive. Wayahihomen et Hadassah, he Esther bat Dodo, ki hen lah avwaem, and he was one bringing up Hadassah. She is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for there was not for her a father or mother. وَحَنَّغَرَا Yafata Tohar Utobat Mara. And the lass was beautiful of figure and good of appearance. Ubamota biha wehimah laqaha Mordecai lo levat. And in the dying of her father and her mother, Mordecai took her to himself for a daughter. Wayahi bihishama devar hamelech wadato ubihika best nagarot rabot el shushan habira el yad hegai. And it was in the hearing of the word of the king and his law, and in the gathering of the lasses, many lasses, to Shushan the palace, to the hand of Hegai. Watilakah Esther el Beit Hamelech. Also Esther was taken to the house of the king. Eliad Hegai Shomer Hanathim, to the hand of Hegai, keeper of the women. Watit Abhanagara Be'enau, and the lass was good in his eyes. Watisha Hesed Lefanau, and she bore loving kindness before his faces. Vayevahel et tamaruqeha ve'et manoteha latet lah ve'et sheba hanrarot harhuyot latet lah mibet hamelech. And he hurried her things of purification and her portions to give to her, and the 7 lasses, the ones seen, to be given to her from the house of the king. Vayeshaneha ve'et nacharoteha letov bet hanathim. And he changed her and her lasses to the good of the house of the women. Lo higida Esther et ammah ve'et moladatah. Esther had not narrated her people and her begetting. Ki Mordecai Thiwa aleha atraloh tagid, because Mordecai had commanded upon her that she not narrate. Ubekol yom wa yom Mordecai mithalek lipnei hatar bet hanathim. And every day and day Mordecai was one walking about before the court of the house of the women. La da'at et shalom Esther u'mahya ashebah, to know the peace of Esther and what was being done with her. Ubehagi tor nagara v'nagara lavo el hamelech Ahashwerosh miqeth hayot lah kedat hanathim thenim ashar hodeth ki ken yimelo yeme muruqehen shitha hodathim b'shemen hamur v'shitha hodathim babashamim ubetamaruqe hanathim. And in the approaching of a turn of a lass and a lass to come to the king Ahasuerus from the end of their being for her like the law of the women 12 months, for thus were fulfilled the days of their purifyings. 6 months by oil of myrrh, and 6 months by the spices, and by the purifyings of the women. وبعد هنربا الهملك את כל תומר ינתן الله לבוא עמה מבית הנתים עד בית המלך. And in this the lass came to the king. All which she said was given to her to come with her from the house of the women as far as the house of the king. בערב היא באה ובבוקר היא סבה אל בית הנתים תני אל יד שעשגז סריס המלך שומר הפילגשים. In the evening she was one entering, and in the morning she was one returning to the second house of the women, to the hand of Shaashgaz, chamberlain of the king, keeper of the concubines. Lo tabo od el hamelech, ki him hafeth bah hamelech, v'niqraha b'shem. She entered not any more to the king, except the king delighted in her, and she was called by name. Ubahagia Torah Esther Batahabi Hail Dod Mordecai Atrala Kahalo Levat Lavo Elaham Melech Loh Bikashu Davar Ki him et atr yomar hegay saris hamelk shomer hanathim watahi Esther noshet hen be'ene kol roha. And in the approaching of the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, uncle of Mordecai, who he took for him for a daughter, to come to the king, she sought not a thing except what Haggai, chamberlain of the king, keeper of the women, said. And Esther became one bearing favor in the eyes of all who were seeing her. Watilaqah Esther el hamelech Ahasuerus el bet malkuto bahodeth ha'ashiri hu hodeth tebet. And Esther was taken to the king Ahasuerus, to the house of his kingdom, in the 10th month. It is the month Tebet, Bishanat Sheva Lamalakuto, in the 7th year for his reign. Wayehab Hamelech et Esther mikol hanathim watishahen wa hesed lefanau mikol habtulot. And the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she bare favor and loving kindness before his faces, more than all the virgins. Vayashem keter malakut barohashah, and he set the crown of the kingdom in her head. Vayamalika tahat washati, and he made her to reign in place of Vashti. Vayash hamelech mishet gadol lekol sharayu va'avadayu et mishet hasater. And the king effectuated a big feast for all his princes and his servants, the feast of Esther. Wahanaha lamdinot asha wayitten mashet kiyad hamelech. And he effectuated a rest for the provinces, and he gave a gift according to the hand of the king. Ubehikka Betulot Thenith Mordecai Yosef Bethar Hamelech, and in the virgins being gathered a second time, also Mordecai was one sitting in the gate of the king. En Hester Maggedet Moladetah We'et Ammah Kater Thiwa Aleha Mordecai. There was not Esther to be one narrating her birth or her people, like what Mordecai commanded upon her. With Mara Mordecai Esther Osha Kater Hayata Bohomna Ito. And the command of Mordecai Esther was one effectuating, like when she was in upbringing with him. Vayamim hahem Mordecai Yosef Bethar Hamelech. In those days also Mordecai was one sitting in the gate of the king. Garth bigatan wateresh Thnesari se Hamelech Mishomre Hasaf Vayavakashu Lishloh Yad Bamelech Ahashwerosh. Bigatan was wrath, and Teresh, the two of the chamberlains of the king, from the keepers of the threshold. And they sought to send a hand against the king Ahashwerosh. Vayewada hadavar leMordecai, and the thing became known to Mordecai. Vayaged lehester hamalakah, and he narrated to Esther the queen. Vatomer Esther lamelech b'shem Mordecai, and Esther said to the king in the name of Mordecai. Vayevukash hadabar vayemateh, and the matter was sought, and it was found. Vayetalu thnehem ala esh, and the two of them were hung upon wood. Vayekateb b'sefer divrei hayamim lipnei hamelech, and it was written in the book of the words of the days before the king.